This agreement is far from perfect, but it will deliver emergency relief to a nation in the throes of a genuine emergency.
Congress has finally, keyword finally, agreed to a stimulus package after several months of squabbling and stalemates. Now, this is going to prevent at least 12 million people from losing their enhanced unemployment benefits and also halt evictions for millions more. This includes $300 per week in jobless benefits, loans for small businesses, money for COVID testing and vaccine distribution, extension of eviction moratoriums, and more. It also includes direct stimulus payments for tens of millions of Americans. Now, people earning up to $75,000 a year, they'll get $600 each. Married couples earning up to $150,000 will get $1,200, and parents will get another $600 for each dependent child. Treasury Secretary Steve Mnuchin says they'll get this cash quickly.
The good news is this is a very, very fast way of getting money into the economy. And again, let me emphasize that people are going to see this money the beginning of next week.
And joining me now to discuss stimulus, President Trump's latest disturbing antics and more, Congresswoman Kathleen Rice. She's a Democrat from New York, and she serves on the Homeland Security Committee. Congresswoman, I appreciate the time, and help us out here because depending on, I guess, where and people fall on the political spectrums, they look at this stimulus package as it nears the finish line. They say, about time, but others say it seems a little light here. How comfortable what's in it and what's not? And is it a down payment or should people look at this as the final package?
So first of all, thank you so much for having me. I don't think this is going to be the final package. This will be a package that enables us to keep the government open past the new year and give some direct aid to people who are hurting, unemployed people, small businesses, increased money for testing and vaccines. Is it everything that Democrats wanted? No. Is it everything that Republicans wanted? No. So I guess in that respect, maybe it was a compromise, but it certainly is just more of a down payment on the recovery that we need to have, not just from a healthcare perspective from this pandemic, but from an economic perspective as well.
Now, I want you to tell me my cynicism's wrong here. Well, obviously, what's not in this is state aid. And listen, we've been taking the daily press conferences from governors across this country, red and blue alike. They're hemorrhaging money, as you know, and they desperately need aid. But on top of that, why should I look at Mitch McConnell, especially if the Democrats don't pick up 2 Senate seats in Georgia, as any different from the Mitch McConnell we've seen over the last few years to say, I'm not going to do something that's going to help out the Biden administration, even if it's in the best interests of America? Why should we look at this as a down payment when I look at some of the players involved that have shown me no evidence that they'd be willing to come back to the table?
Well, you know, there's still a lot of time between now and January 20th, and my hope is that I'm going to see more of my colleagues coming out and saying, okay, we need to get past this election. It was a free and fair election. There is no evidence submitted before a court of law that detailed any legitimate claim of fraud. It's just enough. We need to put the election behind us. I have always thought that former Senator Biden, now President-elect Biden, would be in a really good position to use his friendships with a lot of the senators who are still there. He served with a lot of the senators on both sides of the aisle, and he has relationships with Republican senators. And I think that, you know, once Trump has exited stage left and we are in a post-Trump presidency world, you know, I think there's going to be time for a lot of reconciliation within the Republican Party. At least that's my hope, so that we can have a real bipartisan effort around what I would like to see the first issue addressed from a legislative perspective under the Biden administration would be an infrastructure package.
You know, for folks, I think many know, but if they don't remember, you came to Washington, you were a district attorney on Long Island, so nobody has to educate you certainly on the rule of law. But when you look across the aisle right now for folks that you hope for reconciliation, 2/3 of your Republican colleagues were prepared to disenfranchise more than 10+ million Americans' votes here. Legal, free, and fair votes. 18 attorney generals, for crying out loud, signed on to this. This weekend, the president's having meetings in the Oval about declaring martial law. Again, I want to be optimistic, but why are you more hopeful than maybe I that this fever is going to break as soon as the guy exits stage left?
Because what other choice do we have, honestly? I think that, the Republican Party over the past 4 years has become a party that has surrounded itself around a cult of personality that is Donald Trump. But there's no policy prescription that Donald Trump represented that was the typical concerns of a Republican Party who was actually not totally off the rails. And that's why I think it's going to be an opportunity. Look, we have it within our own Democratic Party, people on opposite sides of the ideological spectrum. But my hope is that we can maintain those ideological differences, but also agree that it's time to come together for the betterment of this country and the very foundation of this country. What makes us a beacon for people all over the planet is our democratic principles and our democratic infrastructure. And I hope that my Republican colleagues are going to, wake up and see that it's more important for them to preserve our democracy than, be on Donald Trump's coattails at this point.
What advice would you have for guys like me when we see the insanity from this past weekend, martial law, et cetera? Do you think we give it too much oxygen, or do you look at it and say, wait a minute, our democracy was literally put to the test here. And the minute we start ignoring assaults on democracy and new norms, there's a danger that it gets harder and harder to come back from. How much attention, and I guess this extends to some of your Cy Vance, he was a district attorney like yourself in New York, in Manhattan. Should we investigate this president post-office here, especially as it relates to the New York AG, the New York City DA? What should happen in terms of the media and even law in terms of holding him to account?
Look, I think the media is going to have to do a major kind of postmortem of this election too, and see, if they're willing to admit that they were somewhat complicit in only giving a bullhorn to people who say the most extreme things from either party, and certainly this president. But the good thing, the good takeaway from the last week is that you had all of our democratic infrastructure respond to these autocratic tendencies of this president in the waning days of his first and last term, and saying, stop. Whether it was the Supreme Court saying, nope, sorry, your efforts to prove that this was not a free and fair election, you have no evidence, we're not even going to consider it. When it leaked that he was having conversations with none other than Michael Flynn in the Oval Office about this martial law thing and, confiscating voting machines. I mean, that is just crazy talk. But the response that you got from members of the military was, that's not going to happen. That's not going to happen. There's not going to be any martial law declared. We're not going to allow it. We're not going to take those orders. So at these, instances where the president has pushed and pushed and pushed, he may have a very compliant Republican Party and Republican colleagues, but the other the democratic institutions that we have set up that make up the three branches of government and federal agencies and our military, they are stepping up and saying, no, not so fast, not going to happen.
How about the Democratic Party and whether or not there's going to have to be a reexamination about the realities of, how thin the margins are in the House and the Senate right now, and a reckoning? And I remember, and you do too, not that many years ago, Republicans had the Freedom Caucus that came out, and many can say that pushed them much farther to the right consequentially. It certainly pushed John Boehner out of the speakership. You and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, you both were up for an important position. It went to you by about a 3-to-1 margin, if I remember right, on a secret ballot. How much of a fight is there going to be within the Democratic Party as to who you guys are right now? And from my vantage point, so I'll put it in my words, a realistic assessment to the margins that exist and that you're going to have to make compromises if you want to get things done. It seems that the progressive wing doesn't want to hear that right now.
I mean, look, one of the great things about the Democratic Party is that we really are a big tent and we have a lot of ideological differences, although we do still feel that we are the party on the side of the people. But I think debates, intra-family debates like this are very good. But I also think that people in moderate positions, more moderate positions like mine, have an opportunity at this point to recognize how slim our majority is, the likelihood that the Senate is probably going to still stay under Republican control, even though we have a Democrat in the White House. That is a recipe for compromise. So I think that we're going to, working with the Biden administration, my hope is that we come up with something like an infrastructure package that we can also kind of team with another relief package for the pandemic relief, because we're still going to be coming. It's going to take us a while to come out of this from a healthcare standpoint and certainly an economic standpoint. And I don't think it's necessarily a case of what ideology is going to win out. It's going to be sitting down and figuring out how much progress we can make to undo some of the things that the Trump administration has done over the past 4 years, and try to do that in a bipartisan way. That's the only way that legislation is built to last, is if it's built in a bicameral, bipartisan way.
So last thing, you got the shot, you got the vaccine. Tell the audience, as I understand it, you said no big deal. You've also seen the rollout, and to put it politely, we've had some hiccups here. How confident are you we've got our act together in terms of the distribution here, so that people can get the vaccine and they'll get the right messaging even from this outgoing administration that they should get the vaccine when made available?
So I did get the shot. It was, just like getting a flu shot. There was no different. I'm a little pain where, you got the shot. But I'm excited about the bill that we have agreed to, because it's going to commit over $20 billion to accelerate the free and equitable distribution of vaccines, in addition to implementing a strong national testing and tracing strategy, and with billions of dollars specifically reserved to combat the disparities facing communities of color that we saw as a result of this pandemic. So, there have always been people who are not believers in vaccines, but I think that people are going to see the efficacy of this vaccine, and hopefully they will do everything they can to protect themselves and their loved ones.
Well, Congresswoman, I appreciate the time, and have great holidays for yourself. Thank you.
Thank you. You too.
Now, when we come back, as I mentioned before with the Congresswoman, the major thing missing from the stimulus package is desperately needed aid for struggling states and cities. Every state in the country is hurting, some in desperate straits. We're going to show you just how bad it could get for people just about everywhere in this country if the money doesn't come in the form of state aid. On the other side of the break, we speak with the top money guy in New York about how big a problem the Empire State's facing.